The Kepler Station Anomaly. Chapter 1. The Signal. Commander Alexei Volkov pressed his palm against the cold viewport of the Kepler research station, watching the distant stars blur into streaks of light as the station rotated slowly on its axis. After 6 months as commander of this deep space outpost, the silence of the void had become both companion and tormentor. The Kepler station hung in the darkness 47 light minutes from the nearest colony, a solitary sentinel monitoring the edge of charted space. "Commander, we're picking up something unusual." Lieutenant Zara Akhafer's voice cut through the ambient hum of the station's systems. She sat hunched over her sensor array, dark fingers dancing across holographic displays that cast blue shadows across her angular features. Volkov pushed away from the viewport, his muscles protesting after hours of maintaining the same position. At 43, he was beginning to feel the toll of zero gravity on his bones, despite the rigorous exercise regimen required of all deep space personnel. "Define unusual, Lieutenant." "It's not matching any known signature patterns," Zara replied, her Nigerian accent thick with concentration. "The signal's coming from Sector 7 Gamma, approximately 0.3 light-years out. Commander, it's broadcasting on a frequency that shouldn't exist." Dr. Kenji Nakamura looked up from his workstation, where he'd been analyzing stellar composition data. The astrophysicist's usually placid expression had sharpened with interest. "What do you mean, shouldn't exist?" "It's operating on a negative frequency band," Zara explained, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. "Negative 430 terahertz. That's theoretically impossible. Energy can't exist in negative states unless we're dealing with exotic matter or some form of dark energy manipulation," Kenji finished, already moving toward her station. "May I?" Volkov watched the two scientists huddle over the displays, their conversation devolving into technical jargon that might as well have been another language. As commander of Kepler Station, his expertise lay in personnel management and strategic decision-making, not the esoteric mathematics of theoretical physics. Still, he could read the tension in their postures, the excitement that bordered on alarm. "How long has this signal been active?" he asked. Zara checked her readings. "That's another strange thing, Commander. According to our logs, it's been broadcasting for approximately 6 hours, but we only just detected it. It's as if something was blocking our sensors until now." "Or as if it just appeared out of nowhere," Kenji added quietly. Volkov felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders like a physical thing. In his 20 years with the Interstellar Exploration Corps, he'd learned to trust his instincts. Right now, those instincts were screaming that this anomaly represented either an unprecedented scientific discovery or an unprecedented threat. Possibly both. "I want continuous monitoring of that signal," he ordered. "Zara, compile everything we have and transmit it to Command Central. Kenji, I need your best theoretical analysis of what could generate a negative frequency broadcast. And I want hourly reports. If this thing changes frequency, intensity, or position, I want to know immediately." As the two scientists bent to their tasks, Volkov returned to the viewport. The stars stared back at him with cold indifference, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something out there in the darkness was now staring back. Chapter 2. The Decision. 3 days passed with agonizing slowness. The signal from Sector 7 Gamma remained constant, neither increasing nor decreasing in intensity, maintaining its impossible frequency with mechanical precision. The crew of Kepler Station had settled into a rhythm of constant monitoring, each member taking shifts to ensure the anomaly received undivided attention. Volkov sat in his quarters, reviewing the latest reports from Earth Command. The response had been swift and unequivocal: investigate the anomaly with extreme caution. The brass back home was salivating over the potential technological implications of energy manipulation on this scale. Volkov was more concerned about the unknown variables. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Enter. Dr. Alina Kowalski stepped inside, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun that did nothing to soften the sharp angles of her face. The station's chief engineer had been running simulations non-stop since the signal's discovery, and the fatigue showed in the dark circles under her green eyes. "Commander, we need to talk," she said without preamble, settling into the chair across from his desk. "About the signal. About the signal, the station's capabilities, and the fact that we're sitting here like sitting ducks while something impossible broadcasts God knows what into the void." Alina's Polish accent grew thicker when she was agitated, and right now, it was practically overwhelming. Volkov leaned back in his chair. "What specifically concerns you?" "Everything concerns me, Alexei. I've been running projections based on Kenji's theoretical models. If that signal represents what we think it represents, a stable form of exotic matter energy manipulation, then we're dealing with technology millennia ahead of anything in human space. And we're just sitting here, 47 light minutes from the nearest help, recording it like it's some kind of cosmic weather phenomenon." "Command Central wants us to maintain observation distance," Volkov replied carefully. "They've dispatched the ISS Hawking to provide support, but it's 6 weeks out at maximum burn." "6 weeks," Alina scoffed. "In 6 weeks, whatever's generating that signal could have moved on, changed its behavior, or decided that we're worth investigating. We're not equipped for first contact scenarios, Alexei. This is a research station, not a diplomatic vessel." Volkov studied his chief engineer's face, noting the genuine fear that underlay her frustration. Alina Kowalski wasn't prone to hysterics or irrational concerns. If she was this worried, there was reason to be. "What would you have me do, Alina?" "Defy direct orders from Command Central." "I would have you be a commander instead of a relay station," she shot back. "We have the Icarus shuttle. It's equipped with a quantum slipstream drive that could get us to the signal's origin point in 72 hours. We could take a small team, conduct a flyby investigation, and be back before the Hawking arrives." "That's a significant risk," Volkov mused. "If something goes wrong, we lose the shuttle and the team. And if we do nothing, we might lose the station and everyone on it." Alina's voice dropped to a whisper. "Alexei, I've been having dreams. Every night since we detected that signal. Dreams of something vast and hungry moving through the spaces between stars. I know how that sounds, but I'm not the only one. Zara mentioned she's been experiencing similar nightmares. What if this signal isn't just a broadcast? What if it's doing something to us?" Volkov felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature controls. He'd been having his own dreams, visions of endless voids filled with whispering voices and geometries that hurt to perceive. He dismissed them as stress-induced nightmares, the kind that came with deep space assignments and isolation. "Have you discussed this with Dr. Chen?" he asked, referring to their chief medical officer. "Chen's been experiencing memory lapses," Alina revealed. "She told me in confidence. Nothing serious, just small things. Forgetting where she put her tablet, unable to recall conversations from the previous day. But it started 3 days ago, right when we detected the signal." The weight on Volkov's shoulders grew heavier. If the signal was affecting the crew's mental state, that changed everything. Command Central had no idea what they were dealing with out here, and by the time they received the updated reports and processed the implications, it might be too late. "Assemble the senior staff in the conference room in 1 hour," he decided. "We'll put it to a vote. If the consensus is to investigate, we'll take the Icarus and see what we're dealing with. But I want contingency plans for every possible scenario, including immediate retreat." Alina's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you, Commander." "Don't thank me yet," Volkov warned. "We may be about to discover why some things are left undiscovered." Chapter 3: The Journey. The Icarus shuttle was a sleek vessel, designed for short-range exploration and emergency evacuation. As Volkov settled into the pilot's seat, he ran through the pre-flight checklist with practiced efficiency. The shuttle could accommodate 6 people comfortably, 8 in an emergency. For this mission, he'd selected a team of 4: himself, Alina, Kenji, and Lieutenant David Reeves, their security specialist. "All systems green, Commander," Alina reported from the co-pilot's position. "Quantum slipstream drive is charged and ready. Navigation has plotted a course that will bring us out of slipstream approximately 50,000 kilometers from the signal's origin point." Volkov nodded, checking the chronometer. The journey would take 72 hours in slipstream space, but only minutes would pass for the crew. The quantum slipstream drive was humanity's greatest technological achievement, allowing ships to traverse vast distances by briefly entering a parallel dimension where the laws of physics operated differently. It was also notoriously unreliable for journeys longer than a few light years. "Kepler Station, this is Icarus requesting departure clearance," he spoke into the comm system. "Icarus, this is Kepler," Zara's voice came back, tinged with static. "You are cleared for departure. Good hunting, Commander. We'll maintain watch while you're gone." "Acknowledged, Kepler. Maintain radio silence unless absolutely necessary. We don't want to attract unwanted attention." Volkov out. He engaged the docking clamps and the Icarus eased away from the station. Through the viewport, Kepler Station dwindled rapidly, becoming a silver speck against the infinite black. Volkov felt the familiar pang of leaving safety behind, but pushed it aside. Command decisions required clear heads, not emotional attachments. Engaging quantum slipstream drive in 3, 2, 1. Reality twisted. The stars outside the viewport stretched into lines of pure light, and Volkov felt his stomach drop as the Icarus transitioned into slipstream space. The sensation was always disorienting, like falling while standing still. Colors that had no names flickered across the viewports, and the very air seemed to hum with alien harmonics. "Slipstream transition successful," Alina reported, her voice strained. "All systems nominal. Estimated arrival time, 72 hours subjective, 12 minutes objective." Volkov unstrapped himself from the pilot's chair, leaving the autopilot to maintain their course. In slipstream space, human intervention was more dangerous than helpful. "We'll maintain 2-hour watches. Kenji, you're first. Wake me if anything changes." As he settled into the small crew quarters, Volkov tried to quiet his mind. The dreams had grown worse since they'd left Kepler Station, becoming more vivid and disturbing. He saw vast shapes moving through darkness that was somehow darker than black, heard whispers in languages that predated human civilization by millions of years. Sleep came eventually, but it brought no rest. He stood in a void that stretched forever in all directions, but this wasn't the clean emptiness of space. This was a hungry void, an active nothingness that wanted to fill itself with light and life and matter. Around him, geometric shapes twisted in ways that violated Euclidean geometry, existing in dimensions that his three-dimensional mind couldn't properly process. "You are small," a voice whispered, though sound couldn't exist in vacuum. "You are new, you are interesting." Volkov tried to speak, to demand answers, but his mouth wouldn't work. His body felt wrong, as if it was being unfolded and refolded along impossible axes. "You come to us with your tiny vessel and your tiny minds. You broadcast your tiny thoughts across the void. You are like insects crawling on the skin of a sleeping god, unaware that the god is merely waiting." He woke gasping, his uniform soaked with sweat. Alina sat in the co-pilot's chair, watching him with concern. "Bad dreams?" she asked quietly. "The worst kind," he confirmed, checking the chronometer. They still had 60 hours of subjective time before arrival. "Any changes?" "Nothing on our sensors. The signal remains constant, but Kenji's been running some calculations based on the signal's quantum signature. You should see what he's found." Volkov made his way to the small science station, where Kenji sat hunched over holographic displays. The astrophysicist looked up as he approached, his eyes bright with exhaustion and excitement. "Commander, I've been analyzing the signal's quantum properties. What we're detecting isn't just a broadcast, it's a form of communication that exists partially in quantum states. The negative frequency isn't impossible, it's operating in a dimension adjacent to our own." "English, Kenji," Volkov requested, settling into the chair across from him. "Think of it like this. Our universe is a three-dimensional bubble floating in a higher-dimensional space. This signal is coming from another bubble that's touching ours, intersecting with our reality at a single point. The negative frequency is actually a positive frequency in their dimension, but it appears inverted to us because it's bleeding through from an adjacent reality." Volkov felt his head beginning to hurt. "So, we're not dealing with something from our universe." "Not originally, no. Though it could be something that crossed over, or something that's always existed at the intersection points between dimensions. The implications are staggering, Commander. If we can understand how this signal propagates between dimensions, it could revolutionize our understanding of physics." "Or it could get us all killed," Alina added from the pilot's chair. "I'm more interested in whether this thing poses a threat than in publishing papers about it." "The two aren't mutually exclusive," Kenji replied. "Understanding is the best defense against the unknown." "Unless the unknown doesn't want to be understood," Volkov murmured, remembering his dream. "How much longer until we drop out of slipstream?" 57 hours subjective, Alina reported, "which gives us plenty of time to consider our options. I've been reviewing the sensor data from Kepler Station, and there's something else. The signal's origin point isn't stationary. It's moving, but not in any pattern that makes sense. The trajectory suggests it's orbiting something that isn't there." "A gravitational anomaly?" Kenji asked. "No gravitational readings at all. It's like it's orbiting empty space, or something we can't detect." Volkov felt the weight of command growing heavier with each new piece of information. They were approaching something that violated the fundamental laws of physics, something that existed partially in another dimension, and they were doing it with a shuttle designed for short-range exploration, and a crew that was increasingly suffering from nightmares and memory problems. "When we drop out of slipstream, I want full sensor readings before we approach any closer," he decided. "If this thing shows any signs of being aware of our presence, we retreat immediately. Our mission is reconnaissance, not engagement." "And if it decides to engage us?" Alina asked. Volkov met her eyes. "Then we find out what our tiny vessel and tiny minds can do against something that exists in multiple dimensions." Chapter 4: The Arrival. The transition back to normal space was as jarring as the entry into slipstream had been. The Icarus shuddered as reality reasserted itself, and the viewports cleared to reveal a starfield that looked subtly wrong. The stars were too bright, their light somehow distorted, as if they were being viewed through a lens that didn't exist. "Position confirmed," Alina reported, her voice tight with tension. "We're 48,000 kilometers from the signal's origin point. Sensors are. Commander, you need to see this." Volkov moved to the co-pilot's position, looking out through the main viewport. At first, he saw nothing but the distorted stars. Then, as his eyes adjusted to the strange lighting conditions, he saw it. "My God," he whispered. Floating in the void was a structure that defied description. It appeared to be composed of intersecting geometric shapes that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Triangles with more than 3 sides, cubes that folded in on themselves, spheres that had corners and edges. The entire structure seemed to be made of a material that was simultaneously transparent and opaque, reflecting light that wasn't there and absorbing light that was. "Dimensions are approximately 15 kilometers across at its widest point," Kenji reported, his voice hushed with awe. "But that's not accounting for the portions that exist in adjacent dimensions. If we could see the full structure, It might be hundreds of times larger. The signal's definitely originating from that thing, Alina added. But there's no power signature, no energy readings, nothing that would explain how it's generating the broadcast. It's like the signal is just part of its existence. Volkov forced himself to look away from the impossible structure, focusing on his responsibilities as commander. Any signs that it knows we're here? No change in the signal pattern. Zara's voice came through the comm link from Kepler Station. But we're detecting some kind of field effect around the structure. It's extending approximately 100,000 kilometers in all directions. The Icarus is just outside the outer edge. Field effect? Volkov asked. The space around the structure is different, Zara explained. Local physics are being altered, not dramatically but enough to be measurable. Gravity fluctuates by 0.001%, electromagnetic fields behave unpredictably, and time dilation effects are beginning to appear. Whatever that thing is, it's actively rewriting the rules of reality around it. Volkov made a decision that went against every instinct as a commander. We're going to approach, slowly. I want continuous readings of that field effect. If it starts to intensify or change, we retreat at maximum burn. Commander, I must protest, Alina said. We have no idea what that field might do to the shuttle's systems, let alone the crew. Which is why we're going to approach cautiously and gather data. Kenji, can you configure our sensors to detect any dimensional bleed-through from the structure? Already working on it, Kenji confirmed. But our equipment wasn't designed for this kind of analysis. We're like trying to understand a symphony by listening to one note. Then we'll listen carefully, Volkov decided. Alina, take us in. 1/4 impulse power. Let's see what happens when we get closer to the edge of that field. The Icarus began its slow approach toward the impossible structure. As they crossed the 100,000-kilometer threshold, the shuttle's systems began to register subtle changes. The artificial gravity fluctuated by fractions of a percent, causing a slight queasiness among the crew. The lights flickered occasionally, and the air recycling system began producing strange odors that came and went without pattern. Field intensity increasing exponentially, Alina reported. We're seeing localized spatial distortions. Nothing dangerous yet, but the closer we get, the more pronounced the effects become. Any response from the structure? Volkov asked. None that I can detect, Kenji replied. But I'm reading something else now. There are patterns within the signal, complex mathematical sequences that repeat at irregular intervals. It's definitely a form of communication, but it's not directed at us. It's more like background noise from a much larger conversation. At 50,000 kilometers from the structure, the dimensional distortions became impossible to ignore. The crew began seeing things that weren't there, phantom shapes that existed for seconds before disappearing, colors that had no names, and geometric figures that hurt to look at directly. I'm detecting massive energy signatures within the structure, Kenji announced. But they're not consistent with any known power generation technology. It's drawing energy from the quantum vacuum itself, from the spaces between dimensions. If we could replicate this technology, we could power entire star systems with a device the size of a basketball. Assuming we could survive building it, Alina muttered. Commander, I strongly recommend we maintain this distance. Any closer and we risk system failures. Volkov was about to agree when the signal changed. The constant broadcast that had been their companion for days suddenly shifted frequency, dropping to a lower register that they could feel in their bones. The impossible structure began to pulse with a rhythm that matched their heartbeats. It's aware of us, Zara's voice crackled through the comm system, distorted by the field effects. The signal pattern has completely changed. It's scanning you. Scanning us how? Volkov demanded. I don't know, but the energy readings from the structure have increased by 300%. Whatever you're doing, it's provoked a response. We're not doing anything except observing, Alina protested. Then it doesn't like being observed, Kenji suggested. Commander, we should consider retreat. We've gathered more data than Command Central could have hoped for. Volkov was about to agree when the voice from his dreams whispered through the shuttle's communication system. You are small, you are new, you are interesting. You have come to us across the void following our song. We remember when your kind first looked up at the stars and wondered. We remember when the stars themselves were young. The crew froze, staring at each other in horror and wonder. The voice wasn't coming through the speakers. It was emerging from the speakers, from the hull plating, from the very air around them. You hear us now, as your dreams have heard us. You stand at the threshold of understanding, but understanding is not given freely. It must be earned through trial and transformation. Commander, the structure is changing, Alina reported, her voice shaking. It's opening. Through the viewport, they watched as the impossible geometry of the alien construct began to unfold. Not opening like a door, but unfolding like a flower blooming in fast forward. Dimensions that had been hidden suddenly became visible, and the crew found themselves looking into spaces that couldn't exist. It's inviting us in, Kenji breathed. The mathematical sequences in the signal, they're an invitation, a test perhaps, or a trap. Commander, we need to leave, Alina urged. Now, whatever that thing is, it's not human. It doesn't think like us, doesn't exist like us. Going inside would be suicide. It would be transformation, the voice corrected, speaking with 1,000 voices that were all the same voice. Your species seeks knowledge above all else. We offer knowledge beyond your wildest dreams, but knowledge has a price, and the price is change. Volkov found himself standing at the crossroads of human history. Behind him lay the safe path: retreat to Kepler Station, wait for the Hawking to arrive, report to Command Central that they'd found something impossible and potentially hostile. Humanity would continue as it always had, slowly expanding across the galaxy, never knowing what lay beyond the veil of normal space. Before him lay the unknown. Whatever waited inside that structure had the power to transform humanity, to elevate them to a new level of existence. But the voice had spoken truly. Knowledge had a price, and the price was change. Commander, Alina's voice was barely a whisper. What's your decision? Volkov looked at his crew, seeing his own fear and wonder reflected in their faces. They were explorers, all of them. They hadn't come to the edge of human space to turn back at the first sign of the truly alien. We're going in, he decided. But on our terms. Alina, prepare the shuttle for maximum shielding. Kenji, I want continuous readings of every parameter you can measure. If anything looks like it's going to kill us, we retreat immediately. And if retreat isn't possible, Alina asked, then we find out what price knowledge demands. Chapter 5, The Interior. The Icarus crossed the threshold into the impossible structure, and reality became negotiable. The shuttle's instruments went wild, registering readings that made no sense. Gravity fluctuated between 0 and 10 times Earth normal. Time passed in strange loops where effects preceded causes. The very atoms of the ship's hull began to resonate with frequencies that shouldn't exist. Commander, I'm reading massive dimensional distortions, Kenji reported, his voice distorted by the strange physics around them. We're not just in another dimension, we're in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The shuttle is existing in at least 7 different spatial frameworks at once. Through the viewports, the crew saw wonders that defied description. Crystalline structures that sang in harmonies that bypassed the ears and resonated directly in the soul. Rivers of light that flowed uphill and backward in time. Living equations that writhed and multiplied, solving themselves in endless cycles of mathematical beauty. My God, Alina whispered, it's not a structure, it's a machine for transforming reality. It's more than that, the voice spoke again, but now it came from within their own minds. It is a threshold, a bridge, a testing ground. Your species has reached the point where you can find us. Now you must decide if you are ready to join us. Join you how? Volkov asked aloud, his voice echoing strangely in the transformed space. By becoming more than you are, by shedding the limitations of three-dimensional existence, by embracing the truth that has always waited beyond the veil of your perceptions. The Icarus came to rest in a chamber that was larger inside than outside, a space where the walls were made of pure thought and the floor was woven from probability. Around them, other shapes began to manifest, beings that existed as concepts given form, intelligences that had long ago abandoned physical existence for something greater. We were like you once, the voice continued. We lived in the three dimensions, crawled across the surface of planets, looked up at the stars and wondered. But we grew, we learned, we evolved. We discovered that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than we had imagined. And when we were ready, we found others who had made the same journey. You want us to abandon our humanity? Elena asked, her voice carrying a note of defiance. We want you to complete it. Humanity is not your destination. It is your beginning. You stand at the threshold of a transformation that awaits every species that develops the courage to look beyond the obvious. But the choice must be yours. Volkov looked at his crew, seeing the same struggle on their faces that raged in his own heart. This was the moment that would define not just their lives, but the future of their entire species. What happens if we refuse? He asked. Then you return to your station with memories that will fade like dreams, leaving only the certainty that you were offered something wonderful and turned away. Your species will continue to expand slowly across the galaxy, never knowing what waits beyond. In time, others will find this place, and they will make the choice you could not. And if we accept, then you will be transformed, not into something alien, but into what you were always meant to become. You will see the universe as it truly is, not as your limited senses perceive it. You will join a community of minds that spans galaxies and dimensions, and you will help guide other young species along the same path. Kenji stepped forward, his eyes bright with scientific fervor. The knowledge we'd gain, the understanding. Commander, this is what we've been searching for. This is why we explore. But at what cost? Elena countered. We don't know what we'd become. We don't know if we'd still be human. Does it matter what we call ourselves? Kenji asked. If we become something greater. The debate raged among the crew, but Volkov found himself listening to a different voice, the quiet whisper of his own heart. He'd spent his entire life reaching for the stars, believing that humanity's destiny lay among them, but he'd never imagined that the stars might be reaching back. Commander, we need a decision, Elena said finally. The shuttle systems are beginning to fail. We can't stay here much longer without making a choice. Volkov looked around the impossible chamber, at the beings that had once been like him, at the machinery that rewrote reality as easily as breathing. He thought of Earth, of the colonies, of all the humans who would never know what waited beyond the veil of normal space. I won't make this choice for all of you, he said finally, or for all of humanity. This is bigger than any one person, bigger than any single decision. We were sent here to investigate an anomaly, and we've found something that could transform our entire species. But transformation must be chosen, not imposed. He looked at each member of his crew in turn. I vote that we return to Kepler Station and report what we found. Let humanity decide for itself whether it's ready for this step. Elena nodded immediately. I agree, we're not ready, maybe someday but not yet. Kenji looked torn but finally nodded. Knowledge should be shared, not imposed. Let the people decide. David Reeves, who had remained silent throughout the encounter, finally spoke. My job is to protect people. I can't protect them from something I don't understand. We need to go back. The voice in their minds carried a note of approval. You have chosen wisely. Not all species are ready for transformation, and forcing it upon the unwilling would be a violation of everything we stand for. You may return to your station with your memories intact. The choice will wait for another day, another generation. As the Icarus turned to leave, the voice spoke one final time. Remember what you have seen. Remember that the universe is far stranger than you know. And remember that when you are ready, we will be waiting. Chapter 6: The Return. The journey back to normal space was less disorienting than the journey in had been, as if the structure was helping them transition back to their limited three-dimensional existence. The Icarus emerged from the impossible construct to find the stars shining with reassuring normalcy, their light no longer distorted by dimensional interference. All systems returning to normal parameters, Alina reported, her hands flying over the controls. The dimensional distortions are fading. We're reading standard vacuum conditions outside. The signal has stopped broadcasting, Kenji added, his voice carrying a note of loss. The structure is still there, but it's gone silent. It's waiting again. Volkov checked the chronometer, surprised to find that less than an hour had passed since they'd entered the structure. Subjectively, it had felt like days. Plot course for Kepler Station. Let's go home. The return journey was made in contemplative silence. Each member of the crew was lost in their own thoughts, processing what they'd seen and experienced. The dreams that had plagued them since first detecting the signal were gone, replaced by memories that felt more real than reality itself. "Commander, I have to ask," Alina said as they approached Kepler Station. "What do we tell Command Central? How do we explain what we found?" "We tell them the truth," Volkov replied. "We found an alien structure of unknown origin that appears to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It communicated with us and offered us a form of transcendence that we weren't ready to accept. We recommend that the area be declared a restricted zone until humanity develops the wisdom to make an informed decision about contact." "Do you think they'll listen?" Kenji asked. "They'll listen to the data. They'll listen to our recommendations. But ultimately, the decision belongs to every human being, not just the people in charge." As they docked with Kepler Station, Zara's voice came through the comm system, filled with relief and curiosity. "Icarus, welcome back. We've been monitoring your approach. What did you find out there?" "More than we ever imagined," Volkov replied. "Assemble the entire crew in the main conference room. We have a lot to discuss." Chapter 7: The Report. The conference room was packed with every member of Kepler Station's complement. Volkov stood at the head of the table, looking at faces that showed a mixture of relief at their safe return and curiosity about their findings. He'd spent the journey back organizing his thoughts, trying to find words for concepts that defied description. "What I'm about to tell you," he began, "will sound impossible. But I want you to know that every word is true and that we have sensor data to back up our observations." Over the next hour, he detailed their journey into the impossible structure, their encounter with beings that had transcended physical existence, and the choice they'd been offered. He watched expressions change from skepticism to wonder to fear as he described things that violated everything they thought they knew about the universe. "So what happens now?" Dr. Chen asked when he'd finished. "Do we just pretend this never happened? Do we go back to our regular duties as if we hadn't been offered the chance to become something more than human?" "We do our jobs," Volkov replied firmly. "We continue monitoring this sector. We maintain our research. But we also prepare reports for Command Central, recommendations that this area be declared a restricted zone until humanity is ready for what it contains." "And when will that be?" Zara asked. "When we're wise enough not to destroy ourselves, when we've learned to look beyond our own petty differences, when we've earned the right to join a community of transcendent beings." "Yes," Volkov said simply. "All of those things and more. We found something out there that could transform humanity, but transformation isn't something that can be forced. It has to be chosen, freely and with full understanding of the consequences. Elena spoke up. Commander, I need to report that the nightmares have stopped. The memory lapses have ceased. Whatever was affecting us through the signal has ended. But I don't feel like I've lost something. I feel like I've gained something. Perspective, maybe, or hope. Hope, Kenji asked. Hope that we're not alone in the universe. Hope that there's something greater waiting for us. Hope that all our struggles and strivings aren't meaningless. Volkov nodded. That's what we bring back with us. Not just data and reports, but the knowledge that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. And that someday, when we're ready, we'll take the next step in our evolution. But for now, he continued, we have a station to run and research to conduct. The universe is full of mysteries and we've only just scratched the surface. Let's get back to work. As the crew filed out of the conference room, each lost in their own thoughts, Volkov returned to the viewport where this entire journey had begun. The stars looked different now, not because they had changed, but because he had. He thought about the choice they'd made, about the path not taken, and wondered if future generations would curse them for their caution or thank them for their wisdom. Perhaps both, perhaps neither. But mostly he thought about the vast, strange universe that waited beyond the veil of normal space, and the community of minds that had learned to navigate its impossible geometries. They were out there still, waiting patiently for humanity to grow up, to become ready for the next stage of existence. It would happen, he realized, not in his lifetime, perhaps not for centuries or millennia, but someday humanity would stand at that threshold again, and they would choose transformation. They would step across the boundary between what they were and what they could become. And on that day, they would discover that the universe was even stranger than they had imagined, filled with wonders beyond comprehension and beauty beyond description. But until then, there was work to do, research to conduct, mysteries to solve, and the slow, patient work of preparing humanity for its next great adventure. Volkov turned away from the viewport and returned to his duties, carrying with him the memory of impossible geometries and the promise of transcendence. The universe was waiting, and humanity was on its way. Epilogue: The Waiting. In the impossible structure that existed in the spaces between dimensions, the assembled minds continued their eternal vigil. They had been human once, or something very like human. Now they were concepts given form, intelligences that had learned to dance between dimensions and sing the songs of stars. They will return, one mind spoke, though speech was an inadequate term for the communication that passed between them. They are not ready, another observed. They are closer than they were, a third added. The fact that they found us, that they understood enough to be frightened, that they chose wisdom over ambition, these are signs of progress. How long? Asked a mind that had once been called Elena Kowalski, though names no longer had meaning in this place. Time is a river that flows differently in each dimension, replied the voice that had first spoken to the human crew. They will return when they are ready. A year, a century, a millennium. It matters not. We have learned patience in our transcendence. And if they never return? Asked the mind that had been Kenji Nakamura. Then they were not the ones we waited for. The universe is vast, and intelligence blooms in countless forms. Somewhere, in some dimension, a species will arise that is ready to take the next step. Until then, we wait and we watch and we remember what it was to be human. The assembled minds turned their attention back to the infinite dance of dimensions, to the music of the spheres that played across the fabric of reality. They had all the time in the universe, and they were willing to wait. After all, they had learned patience in their transcendence. And somewhere, in a distant dimension, a species called humanity continued its slow climb toward the stars, unaware that the stars were waiting for them to arrive. The signal had been sent. The invitation had been issued. The choice had been made. But the universe was patient, and the waiting had only just begun.